What started as a simple weekend project to solve a problem that I was having in my personal training business became into a 6-month project that taught me more about coding, business, app development, and plenty of other stuff than any other thing that I've learned in university. And honestly, I almost gave up a couple of times. If you're new here, my name is Daniel. I'm a software engineering student and I also work as a personal trainer. And this is the first story of the roller coaster that it was to upload my first application to the App Store. Trust me, if you're like me and you want to build your own application and submit it to the App Store, you're gonna want to hear this story because I'm gonna make every mistake that you can possibly think of and you're probably gonna learn from it. But not only that, I'll tell you how to avoid them. Before I start with the story, I would really appreciate if you can give me a like and subscribe to my channel because I know a majority of people that watch my channel, they still haven't subscribed. So just hit that subscribe button so you can help me out. Here's how the whole thing began. I was giving feedback to one of my clients about her lifting videos and I was using WhatsApp to do so. WhatsApp is okay. Instead of her sending me the videos on our usual chat, we created a group where we only talk about the lifting videos so that way they're not so lost across our chat. But the feedback, it's still lost after a while because after so many videos getting sent, she can apply what I tell her week to week, but there's no way of us actually tracking down what's been happening and what feedback have I been given. And not only that, it's uncomfortable to have to look at the program and see what she's doing at the same time because I just don't know what's going on since I have to be paying attention on 2 spots at the same time. I thought about using Loom for my business, but honestly I'm not gonna pay $15 for so many features that I don't really need, so I did what every other developer would have done. I thought I was gonna build this project in a weekend, and why not? I would save myself the money and gain the experience of actually developing this application. I didn't really want all the features that Loom has. I only need a way of seeing videos, adding comments to it, and then having a way of the coach and the client to interact on that same video. If you really think about it, kind of like an unlisted video on YouTube, but you will also be able to see the details of that specific set into the video, so you wouldn't have to be looking on 2 places at the same time. You will only have to look at the video where you will have the information about the sets, the RPE, the load, etc, etc. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a weekend, it took me 6 months to develop this. To be fair, it's not 6 months of full-time development. When I started this project, it was December, so I had a bit more time off because of the holidays. But once uni started and things got a bit more busy, then I had to pause it for a while and we'll get back into it, but I don't want you to think that I spent these 6 months building this single application because that wasn't the case. I was just building it on the side, and psychologically I had to overcome the barriers of sitting myself in the computer and also understand that I had no idea what I was going to be doing.
Why isn't it working?
Because I have no idea what I'm doing.
And I noticed that multiple times I was delaying myself just because I didn't want to feel that emotion. The first reality check was the camera development. The core idea was simple: record a video, auto-trigger a trimmer so that you can edit the video right away, add some of the lifting stuff on top of the video, and then save the video. Extra points if I could get the compression to happen when the user saved the video so that the user could save some storage on their device. How hard could it be, right? The first thing that I learned is that starting with the camera functionality was more complicated than I thought. Not because of the complexity of writing the code, but because of the complexity of not truly understanding what Expo and React Native are and what development builds were. I spent some time choosing between Expo Camera and React Native Vision Camera, and I ended up deciding for React Native Vision Camera because, as usual, Expo solutions tend to be quite good for simple things, but they tend to be quite opinionated, and I didn't want to have a slow camera that barely worked instead of the maximal capacity that that camera could have and having it as fast as possible. I could accomplish this by deactivating a lot of things that I know that users when they're recording in the gym don't need. Expo Camera didn't really have the options for me to customize those things, but React Native Vision Camera did. And here's where I hit my first wall because I couldn't understand what was the difference between a development build and me building an Expo Go. The other application that I have experience developing in React Native, I use Expo Go for 99% of the development. It's very simple, but still it got me into thinking that I could do everything with Expo Go, and I didn't quite understood what would that imply. Once that I slowed myself down, read the difference between development builds and Expo Go, I kind of understood how to install properly React Native Vision Camera, and it was a breeze. I learned a lesson there. From the future, I'm always going to start a project with development builds instead of using Expo Go, ideally in my physical device. With the camera working, I moved to the editing features. My next step was to find a way to overlay the text of the lifting stat that I wanted to have on top of the video and find a way of saving them on top of the video. This sounds simple, but I realized that React Native doesn't really have too many libraries that involve video editing, and I found some online tools that you can hire only if you pay like $5,000 a month, which is crazy. Now I understand why apps like CapCut are so successful, because there are probably not too many of them. Luckily, I did find a video trimmer library. This made my life much simpler because I was gonna buy a course on Udemy about how to build it myself because I couldn't find a library that worked, and when I found this one I was so happy. But obviously I hit another wall. I had a weird conflict on the version that FFmpeg had in my current project that I was using to overlay the text and the version of FFmpeg that the React Native video trimmer library had installed. I spent like a week trying to figure this thing out. The problem was in the pods in the iOS build. I just didn't know how to fix it. I've realized that I've developed this habit of just reading the bare minimum of the things that I need to do to actually deploy a library, but not actually reading the whole documentation. And at the bottom of that GitHub repository was the solution what I needed to my problem. So if I had read that whole repository before I actually implemented that library, I would have saved a week of work. But hey, lesson learned. After getting the core of the MVP done, I only had to do the boring stuff. I needed to find a way of doing the authentication, database, payments, all of that boring stuff. So I just put the project on hold, thinking that nothing bad was gonna happen. And I had other stuff to do. I was a bit busy with life, uni was getting a bit hard, so I decided to put the project on hold and just didn't think too much of it. That was until I saw the news. FFmpeg for React Native was gonna be deprecated and archived. I was so scared when I read this news because I've never experienced this. I've read this of things happening to tools before, but I've never been a developer when this happened, so I didn't know how to react. I ended up being quite lucky in this project. I couldn't save the video with the overlay text of the lifting stat, but I was able to keep the video trimmer because the amazing guy that built the React Native video trimmer library was notified that the library was going to close, and he moved it away from using FFmpeg and moved it to use the native editing video tools from iOS. A friend told me that I could fork the repository before it got archived and that I could do those things locally, but honestly I just don't know how to do it, and if I'm gonna have to go through the struggle of having to implement a deprecated tool, I'd rather go through the problem of learning how to do custom models on React Native and create a bridge between Swift and React Native so I can use the tools that I need from Apple. After I solved the problem with the libraries, I decided to create a build and upload it to TestFlight and see what friends could I have that could use the app. Honestly, I was pretty bummed down to know that many of them barely use the app, and I had only one user that he was pretty much a power user. He was constantly using the app in his trainings, and he even asked me what was I gonna do to promote because he wanted to promote it on his Instagram stories. Since he was so engaged with the project, I asked him if not having the possibility of saving the video with the lifting stat was gonna be a deal breaker or not. He told me that he didn't care as long as he could see the lifting video stats within the application, which it was easy to do. The main problem is actually storing the video with the lifting stats on top of it. I was mainly gathering feedback from him to improve the app, so while he was giving me feedback, I was building all of the boring stuff from the application. The database, the authentication, everything that it was incredibly boring that I knew that I was going to be able to replicate in another applications. I did that with a hidden goal in mind. I wanted to create a boilerplate or a scaffold of the code that I'm going to use on every application so that I can ship my next project a lot faster. You have a lot of boilerplates that exist both in React and React Native and multiple languages and frameworks, but you don't have that many boilerplate codes that they use AI. But that's a story for another video. For the authentication and the database, I ended up using Supabase. For handling the payments, I use RevenueCat, and I've installed PostHook and Sentry, but I still actually haven't implemented into the application because I think that I was more concerned about shipping fast than about tracking all of the things that the user could do within my application. I think that it was a rookie mistake, and I was definitely being rushed about shipping, but I was also feeling that I was investing too much time into this idea that I don't know if it's going to work. The previous time that I worked with authentication, I used Firebase, and it was super hard just because we didn't know how to implement it into our application. We were trying to do the data fetching on our own, and we were encountering so many problems that I just didn't know how to handle it because there were so many edge cases, so many concerns, so many problems that were showing up until I was searching on Reddit and I found React Query, and that library solved so many of my problems. This second time that I'm handling authentication now with Supabase, it has been much easier. The previous time I didn't even set up social logins, and over here I did Google sign in and Apple login too, and it was much easier to implement. The really tricky part wasn't so much writing the code for these things, it was more about setting up the consoles in App Store Connect or in the Xcode platform or in the Google Cloud platform, because they're so intimidating and so badly designed. They don't really care about the developers portal, I don't know why, so the first time that you're doing these things is quite intimidating. When I was reading the documentation for Supabase, it was around the same time where they released their MCP, and I was tempted to plug in my cursor with their MCP, but if you've seen my previous video, you're gonna know why I didn't do it. I didn't want to give that amount of control to the AI. And it's a tool that I'm probably gonna keep using for the next few years, so I wanna really understand how this tool works and understand their documentation. Setting up authenticated navigation was a bit tricky. I remember I faced this problem too the first time that I built an application. This time I was thinking on deciding between Expo Router or React Native Navigation, and I ended up going for React Native Navigation. Like I said when I was explaining my point on the Expo camera situation, something similar happened here. Instead of using Expo Router, which is built on top of React Native Navigation, I'd rather use React Native Navigation that is much less opinionated. It allows me to do a lot more things, and yes, it is more complicated, but it's one of those gold standard tools that is probably going to keep being used across the React Native ecosystem. Being honest with myself, I still have a lot to learn about navigation, but this was enough for me to actually build the project and get it working properly. I'm gonna be honest, I spent a lot of time reading Reddit, and that has given me the perspective that I need on what libraries and what strategies to use for each library. Even though I don't have a massive necessity to handle global state, I still use Susdan from the beginning. Even though I don't have a big enough project to experience the slowness of async storage, I still use MMKB from the beginning. And again, to this day, I still don't know how to use context. In my experience, it's just a nightmare. It's just so much better to actually use Susdan. It wasn't for anything complicated. The application required to handle the state of if the user was going to use kilos or pounds, what font they were going to use, what color was the background of the font we're going to have, what color was the actual font going to be, what size the font was going to be. All of these small state things, I just handle it with Susdan because it was much easier. For the video albums, I did also decided to use Flashlist instead of Flatlist from Shopify because I've heard that the performance is much better. Like I said with the MMKB stuff, I still haven't built an application that is large enough for it to be experiencing problems with speed, but I know that's gonna help me in the future. This was one of these things that I changed my mind at the last minute, and that was that React Native released an update with a usage of a new architecture, which I still don't really understand too well what it does, but I know that it's faster, and I didn't want to update my project because I didn't want to waste any time. However, I ended up changing my mind and updating that at the last minute, and it broke a couple of libraries. So if you're going to install something like Flashlist or MMKB or Susdan, you're probably gonna have to set it up differently if you're using the new architecture or the old architecture. This decision only cost me a couple of days, and for me it just made more sense because I want to keep this project updated, and the idea of this project is not only to ship an idea that I think is going to be successful, but also to make me grow as a developer. And if I was gonna have to do that update sooner or later, I'd rather get it done sooner. Once I had the core functionality of my app done, the next two important steps were going to be UI and onboarding. This is how I discovered something that completely changed the way that I was doing the UI for my applications. I asked Claude to give me a single code file with at least 5 different UI designs that I could use for my new application. I only wanted to use one code file because I wanted to endlessly scroll on that same page because it was going to be easier for me to judge what did I actually like for this project. After I made my decision on what design did I really like, what I did was to ask Claude to give me a cursor rule file of the explanation of the branding and the colors that UI design had and how AI will need to use it for future UI redesigns. I then grabbed that cursor rule and added it to my project. Now I went to every screen that I had designed from before and redesigned it with the colors that Claude gave me for this new design. I haven't done that many projects, but this was the easiest way that I found to redesign a whole application in just a couple of prompts. I literally just had to go page by page, adding the UI design and asking Claude to change it, and that was it. I know that onboarding is the most important part of an application when they're trying to convert a user, because when I read the revenue cut report from the previous year, that if you haven't seen my video, that you should really take a look at it, I learned that 80 or 90% of the conversions happen on day 1. So I used this same UI design to create the complete onboarding of my application. I'm gonna be honest with you, I think that I need to completely redesign the onboarding, but at least for this stage of the project, I just wanted to ship it. I did the bare minimum to design the onboarding of the user, and then I'm going to redesign it into something much better. I actually just took a look of an onboarding flow that a successful indie hacker on Twitter was using, and I plan to implement that into my application, just not yet. I said that I had all the boring part done from the application, but there was one missing link that I was leaving for last, and it was because I was the most scared for this one, the payments and revenue cut. When I first took a look at the revenue cut documentation, I was honestly intimidated. It looked very well explained, but I'm just frightened of actually charging clients and having problems with them, or just disappointing users that are entering into my application and having problems with payments. But here's the thing, Revenue Cat are pretty much the king of what they do, and it's because they're really good at it. The documentation was really clear, it was very easy to set up, and I had it run in a couple of days. I struggle a bit on understanding the sandbox environment because you can't really test for Revenue Cat in a development environment, because before you can try Revenue Cat in development, you have to adjust some things on Xcode, and it took me a while to figure out what did I have to activate and how did I have to create sandbox developer accounts on App Store Connect. After that, it was working a little bit better and it was easier to understand the problems that the application was having. I decided to choose a hard paywall for this application, at least for the time being. In the report, it said that this is a type of monetization that converts the most, but it has the less amount of users, which sounds like a great trick to me. I don't really care about having a massively downloaded app without actually having any money coming in, because for me, that's the main part of why I'm building these applications. I decided to go for a monthly payment, a yearly payment, or a lifetime payment. You have two different prices. One paywall is only going to be available during the onboarding, and the other one is only going to be available after the user uses the application. They both have a week of free trial, so they can just try the app and after 7 days they can just not use it. But if the user decides to cancel it and doesn't come back, then they're gonna have to pay the other prices instead of the onboarding prices. Now at this point, the app was working perfectly, and I got a little bit confident because AI had helped me so much and I didn't really run into any big problem implementing the payments. I thought that everything was going to be fine. I implemented the listener so that I knew that the user was in membership or not. I created the screen locking the actual application from the user if they didn't have any membership. I thought that I did everything right. Clearly I didn't. I did the first upload to the App Store Connect. I had a bit of back and forth about the application with the reviewers. Honestly, it wasn't so bad. I thought it was actually surprising and everything was great. My app was ready for development and I started scripting this video. But then I asked my girlfriend her phone to download the app and making sure that everything was okay, and it didn't work. There was something going on with the listener that I set up to actually hear if the user had a membership or not, and even after they sign up for a membership, it still locked them out of the application, so I had to solve that. Honestly, I spent like a whole afternoon feeling really sorry for myself, thinking that I'm such a shitty developer, how I'm relying on AI too much, and after that I just have to figure it out because I just really want to get this project out there and start promoting it, because I know that I wanted to tell the story on my YouTube channel and I didn't want it to keep delaying it. I spent the last week or so fixing that bug and I thought it was going to be done, but then the reviewers were just really annoying this time and we went back and forth for at least a dozen of times. It took me a whole week to actually upload the application update into the App Store, and that's when I said, oh great, now it's actually the time to start promoting this app and see if people are going to use it. So I created the Instagram page, I started finishing the script for this video, and I need to record a couple of social media videos to see how I'm gonna promote that across Instagram and TikTok. Like many things, I need to improve the channel distribution for this application. In order to see if this app is going to succeed, I'm gonna give it a couple of months of my full attention on marketing and see what's going to happen with the monetization of this app and if this app is going to be successful or not. As much as I feel like that I need to, I don't want to spend the whole summer building features for an application that it's honestly not making any money. It's a bit different if an app doesn't make any money because the product is bad than if the product is just not needed in the market. Honestly, this is just a problem that I have for me and I'm solving a problem for myself, and I want to see if other people have this problem. This is still not the final version of what I want to build, but it's at least a step forward. In my head, like the long-term vision would be to have an application like Coach Now, but specifically for powerlifters, that is a combination between that Coach Now app and Loom. I'm going to spend the whole summer trying to market it and see where it goes. Right now I have around 20 users that honestly they just came from the App Store. The problem is that those downloaded the app when the paywall problem was going on, so they probably weren't able to use the application. So that was completely my mistake and I should learn from that for next time. I gave a lifetime membership to the power user that was using my beta application and gave me a lot of feedback, so I thought it was a good way of saying thank you, and I just really want someone to keep using the product and tell me if the usage of the app is actually good or is not really something that they will pay for. But in the end, it's gonna take time to actually understand if this is a viable product or not. This project is just another example that those, oh, I can build it in a weekend type of project don't really exist. Things always are more complex than what you think they are, even if you skyrocket your productivity with AI. But I also want you to be delusional the same way that I was, because if I didn't thought that I could build this way faster than I actually didn't, I would probably have thought that I wasn't going to be able to accomplish this. And sometimes instead of thinking so far ahead, it's just so much better to think on the next step that you need to take. And I think that's something that my brain is being rewired by trying to code more and more and more projects projects. I realized how a lot of the things, they're just the same problem solved in a different way and for a different context. But it's not that, it's rocket science. And thanks to this project, I learned about development builds, I learned about how to implement the camera feature into a React Native application, I learned about properly structuring a project from the beginning, I learned a bit more about TypeScript because my first ever application in React Native was using JavaScript, which I know it was a dumb decision. I learned how to optimize the UI of my applications using cursor rules and AI. I learned a ton of things. If you're thinking about building your next project, just build something that you think is going to help you and see if you can make a product out of it. But don't try to reinvent the wheel. Just try building it and don't give up.